It's on behalf of the task force of these new guidelines. Just now, I think it's okay. That's great. And it's my honor to present you the 2023 guidelines on acute coronary syndrome. I have no disclosure for this presentation. So the major change is that in this guideline, we combine non-STEMI and STEMI guidelines, two previous guidelines, into one document. Why we do that? Because, as you know, since the initial assessment and triage, the patient who have, based on EKG, the patient who have an acute coronary syndrome, the most of the management follows the same pathway. So it is the acute coronary syndrome in daily practice is represent a large spectrum in terms of clinical presentation. From the patient who have very few symptoms, to patient who have a classical symptom, and to patient who have a cardiogenic shock or cardiac arrest resuscitation. And all of this is based on EKG. However, we know that sometimes there is a discrepancy between the EKG and the status of the coronary artery obstruction. So we need, as we defined previously in the previous guideline of non-STEMI, we need the help of the ultra-sensitive troponin with the rules of 0.1 hour or ever 0.2 hours, in order to say if it is or not an acute coronary syndrome. And in this algorithm, you see that there is a very huge importance of the coronary angiography in these guidelines, and also with the ancillary imaging when it's appropriate. So at the end, we obtain the final diagnosis, which is unstable angina, non-STEMI or STEMI. So for the first things that we have to think is about the invasive strategy. So for the STEMI patient, there is no change when we look to the previous guidelines. The time is 60 minutes, less than 60 minutes if the patient presents to a center with a PCI, and if the patient presents to a center without PCI or an emergency service, there is the delay is less than 120 minutes. And if it's more, it has to be thrombolyzed. So no change about that. What about the non-STEMI? For the non-STEMI, we said that there is three categories of patients. The very high-risk patient, I don't go in details due in the interest of time, but you have all of it in the guidelines. For this very high-risk patient, you have to go directly to the cath lab as a primary PCI for STEMI. After, we have a group of high-risk patients. And for this, we have a modification when you compare to the previous guideline of non-STEMI, is because for this patient who have a non-STEMI but who have at high risk, they need to have an invasive strategy during the hospitalization, but not to go mandatory to in the first 24 hours. It's based on this large meta-analysis. What we saw that there is a lot of discrepancy between the trial, and there is not signal about reduction of mortality when you perform in this high-risk patient an invasive strategy within the 24 hours. So it's why we decided to downgrade this recommendation to 1A to 2AA. What about also the cardiac arrest? We modify. As you can see, there is no more necessity to have a routine angio if there is not a permanent ST elevation after a cardiac arrest resuscitation. And there is also no need to have hypothermia. So first we think about revascularization, invasive strategy. Now we also have to think about antithrombotic treatment. And you can see in this algorithm, in the first contact, you have to give anticoagulation. However, there is a distinction in this case about STEMI and non-STEMI patient. As you can see for the fondaparinux. For the fondaparinux, for the STEMI patient, it's a class 3. For the non-STEMI patient, it's a class 1. It's dedicated to the patient who have a delayed for the coronary angiography. So it's, and also we have the same point that the previous one about the necessity to give prasugrel better than ticagrelor in patient when you know the coronary angiography, the coronary disease. What is about the default strategy after an acute coronary syndrome? As you can see, it is adapted during 1 year, and after patient that would be to aspirin, is a default strategy. For a patient who have bleeding risk, high bleeding risk, as you can see that there is a possibility of adaptation of the treatments. So it was 2B for 1 month DAPT, it was 2E for 6 month DAPT, and it's make it according to the patient. But also, we decided to have a de-escalation, a possible de-escalation. All of this is very important. We cannot plan this type of treatment, this type of de-escalation, this type of duration during the index hospitalization. It depends of the patient, it depends of the events who occur after the hospitalization. So it's a dynamic treatment, it's a dynamic strategy. It's according to each patient. What about patients who have oral anticoagulation, for example, AFib or pulmonary embolism? There is not change, and we take care of patients who have a high risk of thrombotic events, and we make the distinction between the two categories of patients. So you have the default strategy on left, and in patient when we have a high risk thrombotic on the right. We also, it's a new, we decided what happens after 1 year. Patient has an acute coronary syndrome, what we do with the antiplatelet therapy for after 1 year, and you can see that it is aspirin for life, and also there is a place for oral anticoagulation and even for a double antiplatelet therapy in certain situations. We have also a very important, we upgrade the importance of intracoronary imaging in order to help us to perform the PCI. You can see we upgrade the place for IVUS and OCT to guide the PCI, and we also have a place for OCT in order to better understand what happens with the vulnerable plaque. So also we make a status about patients who have a multi-vessel disease with, as you can see, for the cardiogenic shock, we say that it's not necessary to perform a complete revascularization. It must be staged. We have only to take care of the culprit lesion. Then for the STEMI, we said that the complete revascularization during the index hospitalization, not during the primary PCI, but during the index of hospitalization, it's a 1, it's angiography guided, not necessary to have FFR. And also for the non-STEMI, it's also a place for a complete revascularization. We have a chapter about patients who have a MINOCA, and in this we propose an algorithm in order to make the diagnostic of this MINOCA, and also, as you can see, we upgrade the place of the MRI on this kind of patient in order to say it is a MINOCA and it's not artery disease. So we think that is very, very important. We think about to have a very high treatment for preventive statin during the strategy, during the hospitalization. So we need to have a very high intensity treatment for this patient. And also, it's the first time we have a patient with our task force. And I think it's very important because you have a regard about what we have planned, and it's very good for us. I would just like to finish with this video in the conclusion.